Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask a Farrinarian. I'm Dr. Brian. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, older horses. They are a big part of our practice and man, we love them. They have taken care of us, they've taken care of our kids, they've earned our gratitude, our trust, and we get to give back to them by taking different and more intentional care of them as their needs shift. I'm really excited about this video series because it hits on a couple of sweet spots for me, physically and mentally. I get to be the reference point, an object lesson for talking about trying to age gracefully in spite of past choices. Just like your older horse, I'm trying to figure out how to make my body perform as well as possible and last as long as possible so that I can utilize all the experience and knowledge packed into my head and hands. I promise I don't think I'm that interesting. I'm just living out their journey in my own life. So for me, it's not theory, it's reality. So let's just start with a simple definition. What makes a horse an older horse? There's that old question of, is it the years or the miles? For them and for us, the answer is yes. So an easy way in my mind to break it down is to put them into two categories. A horse that is entering middle age, around 8 to 15 years old. Think of it like the functional equivalent of us being 30 to 40, and then that horse that is in that kind of 15 to 30 year range, roughly equivalent again to us being about 40 to 70 years old. Now this is very much a Venn diagram of overlaps. A great example of that overlap, borrowed from human med, is when a woman is considered a geriatric pregnancy at 34. I think we can all agree that's a bold term, but it serves as a great example of not at all feeling old, and yet there are objective changes happening that you don't necessarily feel yet, or as your body ages. So what are some of the categories that contribute to a horse being older? Now, we'll go over these in much greater detail, but just here's a simple quick list to get us started. Genetics and breed, plenty of overlap on those two. Riding discipline or disciplines, what's their job been and how long have they been doing it? Changing dietary needs and metabolic diseases. Now, we'll go over these two a lot in a later video. In the meantime, we have already a couple videos on the metabolic diseases, so please check that out. Fourth would be their day-to-day life. What terrain do they live on? What amount and what degree of movement do they get throughout the day? And what exercise or what level of consistent exercise are they getting? And then fifth and lastly, good old-fashioned individual variation. The glorious wear and tear of life, that stifle injury that they got as a 2 or 3 year old that would have healed fine if they just knocked off being dumb, might not actually be showing its full effect until they're like 8 or 10. That wire wound, it really looked like it healed great, but as they've gotten older, man, that legs just always caused them a problem. It's a hard concept to grasp, especially if you haven't experienced any of these changes in your own life yet, but older horses are damn near a completely different animal from younger horses, for good and bad. Pulling back the professional curtain a bit, as a vet, in a lot of ways, the younger horses are easy. Just like us when we were young, we were hardly ever hurt, and when we recovered fast because our bodies worked. And God, we could eat whatever we wanted because our metabolism was actually functional. Our needs and their needs shift wildly as we age. There's a host of reasons why the closest thing I have to a primary care physician is the neurosurgeon and the dermatologist. There's a reason that about a decade ago I had to get rid of my beloved candy bowl. It's because even with my very active life, my metabolism could just no longer keep up. So now the candy bowl just holds dumb old fruits and vegetables. As horses get older, it becomes harder and more complicated to keep these guys in that optimal shape, whatever that target is. The years and the miles have inevitably taken their toll. So we need to take different, better, more informed, and more intentional care of them. But here's the big upside, and really one of the main motivators for making this series. those can be some amazing and priceless years and miles and experience and knowledge and personality packed into their heads, their hearts, and those bodies that make them incredibly valuable and absolutely worth the investment. They know so much, they've seen so much, and they should be light years safer and farther ahead than those younger models. It's like laying off that career employee who worked their way up from the literal bottom and replacing them with that 23-year-old new grad with the master's degree. It might seem like a lateral move on a spreadsheet or an obvious choice in the boardroom, but man, that wisdom and experience you just lost was priceless. It may seem to make sense to just get a younger horse and not mess with the limitations and the maintenance of an older horse, but I say often I can do a lot to help an older body. I can't fix crazy or stupid. If you think older horses might seem like they take a lot to maintain, just price out a trip to the ER. So with all that being said, let's get into the practical stuff, and we'll start with exercise and conditioning. To me, there's kind of three levels of activity, again, for us and for them, that are worth being thought through. Housing, just the baseline, where you park them and where they spend the vast majority of their time. Next would be that low to moderate level of activity, and then finally intense or high level activity. So what do I mean when I say housing? Simply, where do they live? In a flat pasture, on the side of a mountain, in a stall or stall run, or some combination of those. I would guess that a stall and stall run combo is super common, so let's just start there. There are certainly some advantages to it, and I do not want to seem like I'm poo-pooing all over it. It's simple, safe, controllable. Everyone eats their food as fast or as slow as they want. You can monitor individual food and water intake. When we get into metabolic issues in a later video, this will actually be a key component. It's a whole lot easier to control what one horse eats compared to 3 horses all sharing a big pile of food. That said, there are so many benefits that come from regular low-level movement. Stalls and stall run combos make this really challenging. So if you're in this setup, an easy place to start is to get the food as far as possible away from the water. Make them walk over to get the food, and then all the way back over to get a drink, and then back again for more food. Even if it's just to turn around and take 2 steps that way and then back again, anything is better than nothing. So let's touch on how important feeding styles are real quick. Horses aren't giraffes designed for eating trees. They are grazers designed to eat off the ground. So whether you're feeding out of a hay net or a trough, put the food as low as possible. This will, one, take a lot of strain off of their necks and backs. It's amazing how many kissing spines or other sore backs get better when you feed them on the ground. And bonus, every time they bend down for a nibble and come back up, guess what? They just did a horse version of a sit-up, a back extension, and a stretch. Feeding from the ground will force them to strengthen their core, their stomachs, and their back, and actually serve to loosen up those aging muscles, again, all their neck all the way through their back, because they're moving through and spending more time in that purpose-built range of motion. Now, to me, in a perfect world, it would be great if a horse could live in a sizable area on relatively flat ground with food as low as possible and a decent way from water. All of a sudden, they're exercising themselves in a nice low-impact way all on their own. This has incredible benefits on their entire bodies, inside and out. There is, after all, a lot to be said for that motion is lotion, in addition to helping their metabolism and their mental state. Now, a key caveat where I live, living on the side of the hill or routinely playing king of the mountain on steep terrain takes an incredible toll on their bodies. I say often just because they can doesn't mean they should. Horses can navigate hills just fine, but that doesn't mean they should live on them. It's really hard on their legs over time. Secondly, obviously, I'm a big fan of making sure they have room to move, and there's so many benefits in just letting horses be horses. As I'm filming this, however, we're in that ice, snow, and frozen mud season. Living on that hard and irregular and icy ground rather than in a nice, clean, flat stall is tough on joints. Joints of all ages, but the older horses, way more than the younger horses, are showing those effects a lot right now. So all that said, really it's a sliding scale, and again, it takes thought and effort, and a lot of times just comes down to choosing the lesser of the two evils. Intentionally choose the upsides that are most needed or most practical, and manage the downsides and liabilities of whatever system you choose. So let's talk about that next step up in activity, just the simple low level. This level applies to horses of whatever age. For some, this could be the most they are capable of. For the more active, this is more of what you could think of as warm up or cool down, or really just some things that you can do with any horse when you need to decompress, kill some time at a horse show, return emails, or just the conditions aren't great for riding. If you could do nothing else, barring an acute injury, just take your horse for a walk. That pretty well sums up this level. Walking. There are all levels of walking for us and for them, going for a stroll all the way up to humping it up a mountain. Just walk around the barn, the farm, or even the neighborhood. Take 10 minutes and go for a walk with your horse at the beginning of your time together. When you take them out of the stall, before anything else, take them for a walk, even if they're a bit crazy. Especially if they're crazy. It will be a much more controlled warm-up and transition period. Compare that to taking them directly from their stall to the round pen, cutting them loose to run and buck, when they're at that peak confluence of pent-up energy, cold muscles, and tight bodies. Take a controlled walk or that annoying, crazy sideways dance that some of them will do if that's how they feel. I bet you're both in a better place physically and mentally when it comes time to throw a saddle on them. They'll have the chance to look at new things, to smell stuff, to eat some junky grass or weeds that we wish they didn't. They'll have the chance to stretch, move, and loosen up. Most importantly, they'll have less need to run some of the stall-bound crazies off and do needless damage to their bodies. Back to me, using me as a quick example, the older I get, the more in need I am when I go to the gym of just doing a long, stupid, boring walk on the treadmill. If I will just hold to that disciplined walk to start, dang if my knees and back don't feel loosened up and better and more capable of performing the more intense things that I'm going to ask of them later. Sometimes that's it. Whether it's because of time constraints or injury, that's the limit of the workout. And that's okay. Whether that's just the warm-up for your athlete or that's as much as their body or your schedule can handle, take them for a walk. Now, moving on to the next step up in activity level would be like walking hills or over some uneven terrain, whether it's in hand or under saddle. To me, there are two main targets here. How you achieve it is up to you. I'm trying to, 1, engage their core, and 2, strengthen their hind end. One way is with flat ground, but with obstacles placed at irregular intervals. Railroad ties are actually great for this, and fun fact, I just learned that you can get them at Lowe's, so it's not like they're hard to find. They're fairly horse-proof, even for the oblivious ones. They're reasonably solid, and they're hard for horses to hurt themselves on. They're tall enough that even the laziest horse has to step over them with some intentionality. Irregular intervals are key. Don't let them get into a rhythm like a hurdler. This forces them to slow, think, collect their bodies, lift their limbs, especially their hind legs, up and over. Horses will use momentum to cheat and just gracefully fall over the obstacle. They're efficient. I want to take that efficiency away. I want them to almost stop and do a good solid rep and use their core and properly engage their hind end. Really, all this walking is just a combination of classic strength training combined with PT and OT, teaching the horse to use its body properly. You see, horses are funny. They are a rear-wheel drive animal. So much of their strength and propulsion comes from their hind legs, but they don't seem to know that. And unfortunately, most trainers and disciplines have devolved to allow it. Also, and unfortunately, this doesn't mean that their underutilized hind end is in pristine condition. It's actually worse. They've been using it the whole time. They've just been using it incorrectly. They've been doing some combination of overusing, underusing, and misusing those key structures that propel themselves forward. Quick side note, hind limbs are an enigma. With a few exceptions, they're just about the only sore thing that gets better with use, proper use. One of the biggest challenges with horses is that they can't not use their body. Now, big time out here, and man, this is really important. With certain conditions and for a certain time, rest is key. Rest is critical. Beyond that, and really with a lot of the chronic conditions that older horses tend to have, the damage just kind of is what it is. And one of the best things you can do is support the problems by doing one, just making their body feel better with whatever sexy doctor stuff is appropriate, sports medicine, and two, just as important, helping them to strengthen their hind end by properly using it. They've got to use it, so let's use it right. Also, sports medicine. It's amazing how many hocks and stifles and hips and even backs get better with appropriate turnout and some light trail riding and some light hill work. So let's talk about hills. We're not talking Everest here. Find a gentle slope, the longer the better, and just spend 5 to 10 minutes walking them up and down at a leisurely pace. Trade secret, I learned so much about a horse with hills, and it's where I try to spend a decent chunk of my lameness and my pre-purchase exams. On the uphill, it forces them to engage their back end because whatever cheating they're doing with their front end just isn't enough to get their big old butts up the hill. They have to use their hind end, and each hind leg has to do some of the work. The downhill side has some small, has a few benefits, but really to me, the uphill half is of the equation is far and away the more beneficial of the two directions, but in spite of what previous generations say, it is in fact hard to go uphill both ways. Let's shift back over for a quick second into that actually really important vet care element for a moment. Like I said before, whether it's injuries, overuse, underuse, or misuse, older horses typically have some hind end issues. Some are scary, some aren't. Most merit some sort of attention from a knowledgeable vet, whether it's systemic therapy, like whole body, think anti-inflammatories, point therapy, like a joint, think joint injections, or complementary therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, PMF, all those modalities are out there. It is critical to get them the help they need so that they can use their body properly and are more able to do all those helpful therapies that we just talked about. So moving back over to our little step up scale, and we're on to the high intensity work, and we'll see if I can actually wrap this thing up. Let's start with a couple of really important rules of thumb. Number one, longer warm up. We've talked about that. Number two, longer cool down. Don't just pound on them and park them. Basically, just recreate your longer warm-up and you're good. 3, fewer reps, fewer jumps, fewer miles, fewer cows, whatever. And then 4th, a longer recovery period. They need more time between events, and the harder the athletic event, it's safe to assume the longer break they're going to need afterwards. To me, baseball pitchers are a great example of this recovery period. The young pitchers, even in the prime of their careers, when everything still feels great, can still only pitch every few days. They pitch a long game and then they give their bodies a few days off. The veteran pitchers that come in during those clutch times to, actually win the game, they might only pitch an inning or two and then they're done for at least a week. Their bodies need longer to recover from less work than the younger guys. This is the hardest and the best part of these older horses. They are seasoned veteran athletes. Oh, they know their jobs. They probably know their jobs better than you do. That's why we love them. We need to give them just enough turns, cows, slides, or jumps to stay current and competent. Beyond that, we need to keep them in proper conditioning in other ways that are easier on their aging bodies. So, $1 million question there, Mr. Dr. Farrinarian. How do you do that? In large part, we've already talked about it. You cannot park them and like when they were young and take them 0 to 60. You have to intentionally work on their day-to-day activity and work hard to incorporate all the therapy they can do for themselves. Be diligent about proper warm-up and cool-down, including that boring sanity walk and stretching. In terms of actual conditioning for the athlete, maybe the single biggest thing, stay out of the round pen. A wise person once said, if you want a sore horse, work him in the round pen. That is some succinct wisdom from years of experience with a wide variety of horses and disciplines, and I can't say it any better. Here's why that wisdom is true. Horses can do tight circles, but that does not mean they should. Round pens and lunge lines absolutely serve a purpose, but please limit how much you use them. Circles are incredibly hard on their bodies, and the tighter the circle, the harder it is for them. Their bodies are hyper specialized for going in straight lines. Just like with our fingers, there can't be much instability sideways, or we'd be snapping them all the time. Their legs committed a long time ago to stability over uneven terrain, going forwards and backwards. Prolonged tight circles are needlessly hard on their legs and really their entire bodies. We have bred incredible minds and capabilities into them. They have come so far from that prehistoric three-toed swamp mutt and those ancestral Sawalski horses. It's amazing. But the fundamentals of evolution and how they are designed to move are still determined and limited by those bodies that adapted over millions of years for straight lines. Don't forget that. If you want to condition your horse and put the least amount of unnecessary strain on their bodies, straight lines and gentle-ish hills. Do just enough of that awesome athletic stuff to keep them current and competent. The remainder is proper day-to-day activity management, rest, recovery, warm-up, and cool-down. Save the crazy stuff for the crazy young ones. They need the reps, not your good old horse. They know their stuff. So here we are at the end of part 1. Please join us for part 2 and maybe part 3. We'll see. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please like it, share it, subscribe, follow, all the things. It really helps others who also care about their horse to find us as well. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch and learn more about your horse. Talk with you more soon.